Hello, you guys, and welcome back to the Notes and Quotes podcast. So glad to have you guys on. Thank you so much for joining the community and listening to this episode. It's a joy to have you. If you want to do us a favor, you can fill out our listener survey, which is in the show notes. It takes less than a minute and it helps me figure out how to build the best possible podcast for you. It just is for you to let me know whether you hate or like this episode and or any of the episodes that we've done for you or that you've listened to. That's about it. Moving swiftly on because I feel like this is the second episode I filmed today and my brain is a little bit like fried. So I'm rushing through the intro because I want to get to the good bits. And the good bits is that we have a guest today. I've just finished filming or recording rather his episode and he was brilliant. This was a conversation that I think was really needed, not only for myself, but also for, I think, young adults and anybody else who's feeling stuck or lost or unsure about the future or their now. And they just want some reassurance, some guidance, some advice, anything to just make them feel a little bit less like that. Now, today, who are we talking to? We're talking to Coach Ed Bradley. He is the co founder of Powerful Minds Counseling, a transitional life coach, motivational speaker, and educational consultant based in Gulfport, Mississippi. He's a former high school basketball coach, psychology, sociology, and history teacher. Trust me, all of that knowledge comes into this conversation. Ed brings over 25 years of experience helping people navigate life's pivotal transitions. He specializes in preparing high school students for success after graduation and guiding adults through career changes and midlife reinvention. Known for his direct yet encouraging style, Ed blends coaching, counseling, and engaging public speaking to inspire action and self belief. Something we all need, let me just say. His mission is simple: empower individuals through education, self awareness, and strategic steps towards their best future. Now, if that doesn't sound like something you need in your life, I don't know what is. What do you need in your life? Doesn't everybody want to have their best future, their best now? And that's what Ed is going to give us today in this conversation. So, without further ado, let's go talk to Ed. Thank you so much to Ed for coming on. It's been brilliant, and you will enjoy this conversation. Coach Ed, thank you so much for joining. How are you today?
I am doing great. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, that's no problem at all. I'm so glad to have you. So, as you know, all of our conversations are framed through the foundation of a quote. It's one thing that the listeners can always take away. And I usually let the guest choose the quote of the day
Mhm.
because you're a guest and I get the boring job of having the quote of the day every single time I do an episode by myself. So, I figured I'd bring a guest on and let them choose the quote. So, what is your quote that you've brought for us today?
Okay, my quote is education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Malcolm X.
Wow. Can you tell me a bit about why you chose that quote? Because it's what I love quotes where, and I think I said this in our last guest episode as well, where it's not just straightforward. It's one of those thinkers where you have to read it again so it
Mhm.
can really sink in. And I love quotes like that. So why did you choose this quote?
Well, it's kind of there's a few layers to it. Number one, I feel like the quote kind of speaks to what I'm doing now and really what I've done my whole career, my whole professional career, which is helping people prepare for life as they, kind of go through these intentional as they go through change in life. So helping people prepare for life as they want through intentional planning, learning, and growth. For me, whether it's with high school seniors heading to college or an adult making a career pivot, preparation
Yeah.
is everything, and I think there's a misconception about what education is. Education is not just books and tests and, go and sit in the classroom and listen to a teacher give you lectures and notes and things like that. Education is learning how to navigate life and make decisions and adapt to change.
Yeah.
So this quote, I think, Malcolm X at the time when he made this statement was speaking to something much bigger than just sitting in a classroom because if you studied him and his life and his teachings, you know that he didn't get a traditional education. So when he spoke
Yeah.
about education, he wasn't talking about, going to Harvard or something to that effect. He was speaking about a real life education. And this is really what I'm doing now. And even as an educator, as a former educator, a history teacher, which is another reason why I chose this quote, because he's a historical figure. I've
Mhm.
seen I have that firsthand knowledge of seeing what, shaping a future can be like. History teaches us that progress is built on preparation. And the people who are best equipped for tomorrow are the ones who take action today. And so I think that perspective is why this quote has always kind of resonated with me, and it's kind of a reminder and a challenge to be proactive in shaping your own future. And
Mhm.
again, education is not just sitting in a classroom. There's so many other things that we need to learn to build, to grow, to become a new person or a better person.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head with that. I firmly firmly believe that even as a person who I graduated a year ago? No, 2 years ago now. I think it's 2 years ago now. Um, so still quite recent, and I was very much a bookworm. I was very much like I wanted to be top of my class all the time, and then when I graduated and I got into the out into the real world, I was like, I don't really know anything
Hmm.
that's, super useful for my everyday right now and actually getting to where I want to be. And I think a lot of young people feel like that. And for you, you spent over 2 decades supporting, young adults and
Hmm.
teens, people who are in their the first baby years of adulthood
Hmm.
and through some of their most pivotal transitions. So, in your experience, what do you think are the most common struggles that people face during this time?
Probably the biggest struggles is expectations. And what I mean by that is uh, we have expectations. But what we think is what other people expect of us.
Yeah.
And we reach at that age, we kind of hit this point where we want to live up to our parents' expectations. We want to meet the expectations of our friends, our families, the people that are around us. But then we're also trying to figure out who we are as a person.
Mhm.
So it's really confusing because you don't want to disappoint your parents who are a major influence on you.
Yeah.
You want to kind of live up to, being that person that your friends and family think you are. But at the same time, there are plenty of times when you realize you're not that person because you're growing into somebody else. And I think it's a real challenge for especially young adults, kids who are going from that age of being kids to being young adults as they navigate that
Mhm.
because they start to realize that they're not just this person that people think they are. There's
Mhm.
something more there, and it can be really confusing trying to figure out who that person is, and it can be also scary trying to share that with other people, because they're not
Yeah.
sure how they're going to be accepted. They're not sure if that's really who they are, and they're really scared as to are they going to be letting people down because this is not really what people expect. I think the biggest thing, again, my 20 some years as a classroom teacher, a basketball coach, I probably had more conversations with young people about their being them and being comfortable in their own skin and it being okay
Mhm.
about that than anything else. And
Wow, really?
you're just getting them to understand it's okay to be who you are. And, your parents and your family and your friends, they love you and they will accept who you are once you've accepted it yourself. So
Mhm.
don't feel you have to hide that. And it's sad, because there are some family members or some people in our lives that, even though well meaning, they don't understand that sometimes when they put that pressure on people, that they're doing more harm than good. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just kind of have to let people be who they're going to be. That doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable. You don't set expectations, and you don't push them to be a better person. But at the same time, you have to give them some room and leeway to grow and to become the person that they're going to be.
Yeah. That's quite reassuring to hear, I think. But my questions that arise from that is like, I guess I'm thinking about it more so from a parental standpoint.
Hmm.
How can you go about doing that? Because I think, kind of leading into my next question with the whole expectations thing, I totally agree that expectations is the biggest thing when it comes to young adulthood and struggles and things that are constantly on our minds.
Hmm.
And I think it also has to do with the fact that Gen Z and their parents, two different generations, two different
Yes.
sets of lives, two different expectations. So for parents who are seeing their kids, trying to be all these different things that feel very foreign to them and doesn't feel like it meets their expectations or what they were doing when they were, that age, it can be really difficult. So do you think that Gen Z, I guess it's kind of a twofold question.
Mhm.
Do you think that Gen Z faces any unique challenges compared to previous generations? Um, Particularly when it comes to those things that you were talking about just now, the expectations, possibly feeling stuck or unsure about what you want to do. And then in the second vein, how do parents actually help build their kids to be, who they are and be
Mhm.
free to be who they are without feeling like they're casting their kids out into, some unsure territory and not being a parent?
Those are great questions. And I hope that all parents are going to really ask that question because I think it's really important. So first off, yes, Gen Z, this generation, they are in a unique situation. They definitely face
Mhm.
unique challenges. We're in a generation of information overload. With
Yeah.
social media, there's so many things going on at the same time, and all you have to do is pick up your phone, and you have access to information and misinformation for that matter. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard not to even mention that as well. So navigating those two things can be an issue, but there's an overload of information. There's an overload of expectations. I think this generation runs into more than anything expectations that are unreal in many cases. A lot of what they
Mhm.
are seeing on social media, and this is something I had to remind kids when I was teaching all the time that when I pick up my phone to make a post on social media, I'm not always going to share the ugly stuff. I'm not going to tell everybody all the ugly things that are happening. I want you to know about
Yeah.
all the great stuff. I'm celebrating all the good stuff. So when you get on social media and you're hearing about all these great things that are happening, keep in mind that there's an ugly side you're not seeing. But unfortunately, we get this kind of shiny perspective without seeing the ugly side of it. Instead of getting the
Mhm.
3D version, we're only getting one side. We're only getting that flat picture, and
Mhm.
we start to believe the flat picture is real life instead of the 3D version, which is really real life. And so
Yeah.
that creates some definitely creates unreal expectations about what life is going to really be like and what life should be. And I think it creates a lack of confidence amongst Gen Z as we grow older, as we go from becoming young kids to that young adulthood and start
Mhm.
become kind of developing into young adults, it definitely creates a problem. And then I think one of the other things that people are not considering, this generation has the unique experience of a large portion of their educational experience was affected by the pandemic.
Oh
How many
yeah.
generations
Yeah.
had basically almost 3 years of their educational experience wiped away because of a pandemic and not just what they were learning in the classroom, but the social interaction that they did not gain from getting up and going
Mm.
to school every day. The routines that we would develop as a child from getting up and going to school every day, those type of things, all those things work together as we develop into the person that we become. And so we have a whole generation that for almost 2 years, in some places, almost 3 years, that didn't experience that on top of the fact that while they were not experiencing that and not seeing, again, going back to that 3D 2D model, when they were not seeing the 3D model up close and personal, they were going on social media and only seeing the good
Mhm.
stuff, not seeing
Yeah.
everything. So now they've got a distorted view of what real life is like, and they're not going through the routines and getting that they're not growing in that
Mhm.
normal routine like everyone else did before them, and everyone hopefully will get the opportunity behind them. So that is huge. That's, realize it or not, and I think a lot of people have not really given a lot of thought to how that is going to impact this generation for years to come. And what effects is that going
Mhm.
to have on them as adults? What effect will that have on them as they become parents themselves? So I think that's
Mhm.
really important. So yes, this generation has some unique perspectives and unique challenges because of the informational overload, the social media pressures that they're dealing with, kind of navigating that post-pandemic uncertainty and how that impacted their lives and their development as kids. But to
Yeah.
go to your, the second part of the question, as parents, I think it's really important that we have an open line of communication. I think it's also important that as parents we understand that the world is not like it was when we were kids. You know,
Right.
I didn't, something as simple as when my child is, and I don't have any kids, but I really have kids because I spent 20 some years as a teacher. So
Teaching,
there's
yeah.
there's 1,000 kids walking around who claim me as their uncle, their dad, their whatever, grandpa, whatever they want to
Yeah.
call me. That I became whatever they needed me to be. But um, w- something as simple as I have a history assignment. When I
Mhm.
was doing the research for that history assignment, I actually had to get up and go to the library and check out a book and read the book and find the information and put that information together. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was in high school, we were in the early stages of using the internet for research. Well,
Mhm.
now that same assignment, the kid doesn't even have to leave their bedroom. They just grab their
No.
computer and boom, the whole world's right there at their fingertips. And
Yeah, yeah.
imagine the differences and realize it or not, that's a huge advantage for the child's education, but it also puts them at a disadvantage for their development when it comes to, actually getting up and learning how to do things. There's
Mhm.
an element there that they didn't learn. I actually met with a group. I worked with a mentoring group the other day, and I met with them, and we were discussing what we call SMART goals, and talking about
Okay.
preparing themselves as they get ready to go from being high school seniors to freshmen
Mhm.
in college. And we were kind of setting goals for things, steps they can take now to help prepare themselves for that first year. And one of the
Yeah.
things we were talking about was, okay, let's set a goal to prepare ourselves for what life's going to be like living in the dorm by yourself. Your mom's not going to be there.
Mm.
Dad's not going to be there. Do you know what it's going to cost if you decide you want to go get you a pizza or something? What happens if you get sick? Where are you going to go? Who do you call? How many of you actually
Yeah.
have access to know your social security number? Those little things like that as an adult you take for granted. I
You don't
asked
think
all
about
of them
it.
like nobody, no one, most of them didn't know their social security number. I asked most of them, okay, if you had to call tomorrow to make a doctor's appointment, how many of you could do that? Well, most of them say, yeah, I probably could. I said, but how many of you would have to have mom in the background asking her, okay, what would I have to say when they pick up the phone? And everyone's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I need to do that. I need that. So it's little things like that. But as parents, I think it's important that we understand that how we grew up is different from how our kids are growing up. And we have to be
Yeah.
open to the fact that there are going to be things that we don't always understand. And we need to create an open line of communication where our kids can come to us and have honest conversations about how they feel and how to approach these situations. And it's okay as a parent to just admit, I don't really know how to handle that,
Mhm.
but you and I together, we can figure it out.
Yeah.
As the adult, I know I have access to things that maybe you don't have access to. I can call people and get answers you probably can't get. So let's
Mhm.
work together. So I think the biggest thing a parent can do for their child uh, in that Gen Z generation right now is open line of communication. Be open to the fact that there are things that you may not be knowledgeable about, and understand that your life is totally different compared to what they went through. Um, I guess the other thing is that I would mention, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Okay.
So with
Mhm.
social media has opened us up. This generation has been opened up to like bullying and things like that online. There's a lot of things online that kids deal with that, realize it or not, we dealt with it also, but it was in person. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
That's
Like,
true.
like bullying
Yeah.
existed when I was a kid, but there was one bully in the classroom. The difference is now if you have a bully, that bully may have 1,000 other people who can pile on to that one ugly
Yeah.
post.
Much larger scale.
Right. It's the same thing, but on a larger scale. So now,
Mhm.
as a parent, I think it's important that you understand also that it was easy for you to say, okay, well, I had that one bully in the classroom and it didn't really bother me because I could ignore that one person. But I think
Mhm.
you need to understand that yes, you had that one bully, but keep in mind that your child has that one bully, and now they have 1,000 other people parroting what that one bully is saying. And keep in mind how that is going to impact your child.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. There's plenty others that I can't think of because, fortunately, I'm not in the classroom anymore. But so
No, you've been doing this for ages, so I don't doubt that you have heaps of experience and knowledge about it, and that's so obvious from everything you're saying. I mean, there was so much value packed into what you just said, and one of the things that really stood out to me was the SMART goals that you were talking
hmm
about that you were giving the students.
hmm
And I feel like that's really incredibly useful at that age between like you said, high school or freshman year or just like, you're still in your teens. And fortunately, there are a lot of resources now coming up for
right,
kids of that age. But then I think young adults are still kind of thrown to the wayside a little bit when you hit your 20s and you're now expected to be an adult. It goes back to that expectations, doesn't it? It goes back
right,
to, you are now an adult. You're expected to kind of get your life together. And
right.
it's really daunting. So if you had smart goals for somebody who's maybe just hit adulthood, they've just hit their 20s, maybe they're even 19 in their, impending 20s or their young 20s or something, what
hmm
would you say are the smart goals to instill confidence in them and make them feel like they can actually move forward with their independent lives?
So the first thing I would say is before we start with those goals,
Mhm.
take that first step regardless of what it is. Let's start there
Okay.
because if you're standing still, then you're not progressing, right? You're you're
Yeah.
you're not getting
Yeah.
any better by standing still. So let's not be paralyzed through fear. Okay, let's start
Yeah.
there. Let's understand also that if we make a mistake, there's the sun's coming up tomorrow, so we can always correct it. The
Mm.
good thing about these things is as we get older, we learn from experience. That I mean, in all
Mhm.
honesty, getting older is just a matter of series of mistakes and how we learn from them. That's what
I love
wisdom
that.
is. That's what
Yeah.
wisdom and experience is. It's just a series of mistakes and how much I learned from those mistakes and what I did to correct those mistakes. So I think that's the first thing. I think a lot of
Mhm.
times what happens with young people, let's say when we graduate from high school or college, wherever the case may be, and kind of like you said, you graduate, all of a sudden your parents looking at, oh, you're 18, you're 20, or whatever the case may be, and
Yeah.
now you're an adult, and hey, good luck to you. I did my part, get out there and
Yeah.
conquer the world. And you're kind of hit in the face with this whole idea like, oh my God, what do I do? Because you have no idea. Like, nobody's taught you what happens, once you graduate and all that kind of stuff. But I think the key is understanding that there's no perfect step. That's the first thing. There's no perfect step. Start small. Pick
Mm.
something that you can accomplish to begin with. Let's start with number one. What is it ultimately that you want to do? And don't compare yourself to others. You don't have
Okay.
to take the perfect step. You just have to take the first step. And
Yeah.
that first step doesn't always have to be right because your next step is going to be based on that first step. So if I take the first steps in the wrong direction, guess what? My next step's going to take me in the right direction. So it's always the key is always learning from my last step and moving forward. I think we kind of touched on this, but we didn't. But like, as we get older and we hit those, you get out of those teens into those 20s, most people
Mhm.
think, and this goes back to those expectations, especially social media, where like everybody thinks, oh, well, I'm supposed to have it all together because I'm 20 or I'm 25 and I should have the
Yeah.
ideal career and I should be married and I should have kids
No,
and
that's huge. Yeah.
yeah, that's just it ain't happening. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen that way. I mean, I didn't get married until I was in my 40s. I didn't meet
Mhm.
my wife until I was, I mean, I was 45 when I met my wife, and we now we're married. We have a great life together. We've developed a company that we've built now that is starting to take off, and we're in year two of that company, and we've gone from struggling to get it going to the point now that my wife is getting ready to give up her full-time job and we're going to do this full
Oh,
time. So,
wow.
but I mean,
Congratulations.
thank you. I mean, but again, we definitely had some moments where we wasn't sure, but we
Mhm,
finally just had to say, "Hey, let's just do it." You got to start somewhere, and I would definitely tell young people, don't be afraid of making that first step. As far as those
mhm,
smart goals, just make sure that you are creating goals that gives you the opportunity to be able. So I'll just, for those who may not be familiar, let's start with SMART goals. Are, if you break down the word SMART, it's specific. So we want to have an actual specific goal that is clearly defined. And the example I
mm.
use with those kids that I spoke to that day, I always joke with them like, okay, so guys, you know, my goal is I want to be a billionaire, right? Everybody's going to say, I want
Yeah,
to be well, it used to be a
yeah,
millionaire, but now being a millionaire in today's world means nothing. So you want to be a
yeah.
billionaire, right? But everybody wants
What's
to,
that
but
mean?
nobody's going to
Yeah.
say, hey, if you had a chance to be a billionaire, would you take it? Nobody's going to say, no, I'm not going to take the $1 billion, right? That's a
Mhm,
great goal, but it's not defined. It doesn't give me anything. So I want something specific. So I want to be a billionaire, but I need to narrow it down. How am I going to become that billionaire? For these
mhm.
kids that we were talking about, almost everyone in that group already attended. Their plan was to go to college. So obviously for
Okay,
them, their first goal is college. Okay,
right.
so our focus at that time was, what steps are we going to take from now, which is August, until you graduate in May? What steps are we
Mhm,
taking to ensure you get an opportunity to go to college? So the first thing we're going to do is, our first specific goal is, by the end of the month, I want you to have applied to 3 universities. We want you to
mhm,
have gone ahead and done gone through the process of applying to get accepted into 3 universities. Any three you want to pick. Go through the process, fill out the applications, pay the application fees, do the essays, everything else. That's your first specific goal,
yeah,
right? So that's the first part of SMART. The second part is the measurable, which is M. Measurable goal includes a specific criteria. Well, in that goal, we said three. We're going to go with 3 universities. That's my measurable. I'm picking 3 universities. So I'm going to apply for those 3 universities, and I'm going to do it
mhm.
by a specific time. Achievable, again, it's real simple. It's easier for me to go in and fill out this paperwork. That's something I can achieve
Mhm,
easily, no problem, right? Relevant, it's relevant to the fact it's going to give me an opportunity to go to college. And then time bound, I told them we had to get this done by the end of the month. So
mhm.
for anybody, any young person who's looking to go and do something, the first thing I would tell them is, take that first step. Make it something that you feel like you can do. Doesn't have to be right, doesn't have to be perfect, but you can break it down into these steps. And then if it don't work, reevaluate. See what you did wrong
Okay.
and start over.
Yeah. Is that what the R is in SMART? Is the
Oh,
reevaluate?
it's relevant. So we want the goal
Okay.
to be relevant so it aligns with my overall objective.
I get you.
Right.
Right.
So my overall objective in that case was, all of these kids were trying to go from being high school seniors to being college freshmen. So what
Mhm.
made that goal relevant was the fact that they were all going to be applying to 3 universities by the end of the
Gotcha.
month.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And then of
Mm.
course the last one time is time bound. So we set a time, we put a time limit on it, that it had to be done within 1 month. They had to have all
Mhm,
those 3 applications completed in a month. And then,
mm,
what we're going to do is, we're going to meet once a month and go in and review and adjust our goals each month. So the
mhm,
next time we
mhm,
meet, we're going to see how many of them, did those 3 applications. Have we heard back? If we
yeah.
haven't heard back, what's our next step? Yeah.
Yeah, you
So
reevaluate then. Okay,
yes,
I get you.
yes,
That's a really good system, I think, especially because goals can feel so daunting as well. Like the
yes.
whole become a millionaire, like where do you start with that?
Right,
That's like
right.
huge. Breaking it down into concrete steps that feel doable is something that
Hmm.
I think is really, really valuable. One of the things that you were talking about before was mistakes and how
Hmm.
mistakes are like stepping stones to learning and actual growth. And I've heard that so often, and I absolutely agree with it. But then also, it's like I don't know if I was gonna say I don't know if it's just me, but I know it's not just me because I've had this conversation with other people in our age bracket. It's like a fear of making mistakes. It's a fear
Yes.
of just
Hmm.
like messing up and doing the wrong thing. And I think it leads into, just a kind of a fight against self-confidence, like the
Hmm.
confidence crisis, so it might be called, that
Hmm.
Gen Z tends to be grappling with. And I don't know if it is something that is, new to our generation, if like older generations were more confident, or if it's because of like all the things that are going on. You talked about the pandemic. There's a lot of global
Hmm.
instability going on. What do you think makes it so difficult for young adults to build self-confidence today?
Well, I think if I had to guess, I think a big part of it is kind of, as I mentioned earlier, like that 3D model versus the 2D model.
Yeah.
I think so many times we have this realistic expectation of where we think our lives should be. And when we
Mhm.
go on social media and we talk to other people, we see always see are the success stories, but we
Yeah.
don't see the failures that lead to the success stories.
Mhm.
A successful person falls down 10 times, but they had to get up nine to get to that 10th time, right? I mean, in
Yeah.
all honesty, the successful person got up that 10th time, and that's when they experienced success. And
Mhm.
so that confidence of that crisis of confidence, I think is built in the fact that we have a generation that honestly have been given a false sense of where they should be in the world because
Mm.
unfortunately we have taught them to compare themselves to other people. And one thing that when I was also a basketball coach, I coached basketball during that 20 some years, and one of the
Yeah.
things I used to tell my team all the time about the season, basketball is a marathon, not a sprint. See, in here in the state of
Mm.
Mississippi, the way our playoff system work is it's not based on your overall record, which is really weird. Like you could lose every game, right? And then you get into
Yeah.
the district tournament. There's a tournament at the end of the year. As long as you win the district tournament, you make the playoffs. So you could be
Really?
you could be 0 and 20 and then win the district
Yeah.
tournament, win three games at the end of the year, and all of a sudden you're in the playoffs. So
Wait, so what's the point of the other games
it's
then?
just to get ready for the district tournament. It's really weird. Like
Okay.
other states is different now,
Okay.
but here in Mississippi, so we would if we lost a game, I'd have to remind them, guys, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like this game
Yeah.
is to make sure we're playing our best basketball come district
Mhm.
tournament time. So let's
Yeah.
learn from all the mistakes we made in this game, so that when the tournament roll around, we don't make those mistakes
Ah,
again.
right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's the same idea when it comes to what we need to start working with our Gen Z, with our young people, is getting them to understand that all the success stories you are seeing on social media, on television, whatever, there are so many failures before you see
Mhm.
the success that in all
Absolutely.
honesty, no one, I don't care who it is, no one has been successful without failure. I mean, you
Mhm.
cannot be successful without failure. You have to learn from those failures and then you have to build on that. And that's one thing. And even as I think also with parents, I think older generations, I think we have to share some of the blame because
Mhm.
we love our kids so much sometimes that we try to shield them from failure.
Yes.
And so many times a child failed, and the parent wants to come in and save them from that failure and blame
Mhm.
somebody else. And no, let them own that. Explain, hey, this is why it didn't go well. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't do this. Show them these are the things you did
Mhm.
not do well enough. You are capable of being successful, but let's go back and let's fix these things and let's try it again. We're not
Right.
quitting. We're not giving up. So again, from my own little personal life, I played basketball. I played football in high school. I was an athlete. I wasn't good enough to play on the next level, but I mean, I loved it. And I was more of a kind of, I thought the game more so than I was as an athlete.
Mhm.
But, my parents never went to my coach and said, "Hey, my son should be playing, and if he don't play, we're gonna move him to another school." Or,
Mm.
my kid didn't play in this game, and I don't know if you see that, if you've
Yes.
seen that,
Yeah.
with where you're from, but it's rampant here. where, oh, my kid ain't playing, so it must be the coach's
No,
fault.
parents
Or
get they take it personally. Yeah.
yes, yes. But here is the thing what parents don't realize. When you take that approach, you're teaching your child they're not responsible for their own
Mhm.
failures. You're teaching your
Mhm.
child not to own their own mistakes and learn from them.
Mhm.
You're not teaching your child how to attack a problem head on and work their way through it. You're
Mhm.
teaching them to come up with excuses. You're teaching them. It's important that they experience failure and learn how to fight through that failure. Now, I'm not saying, you're going to berate them and treat them terrible. No, absolutely not. Uh, you
Mhm.
know, Prime example, when I first started coaching, we had a really good team. I think we had a team the first 2 years. We won 64 games and we lost seven. We were 64-7
Wow.
in 2 years. We made it to the state semifinals. Both times we lost to the eventual state championship team. Now, keep in mind,
Mhm.
this is high school basketball. That team did not have a player who was over 6'3" tall that started or played. Now,
Mhm.
understand that is unbelievable in high school basketball. We didn't have anybody over 6'3" playing that started or played on this team. Yet,
Yeah.
when we made it to the state semifinals, the other teams, their starting fives like 6'7", 6'7", 6'8",
Oof.
like they just towered over us. But
Yeah.
but that team was successful because their parents held them to a different standard. Like we played a game, and I actually still keep in touch and talk to some of these kids because some of the guys on that team actually graduated from high school, went to college, and eventually I actually hired them as my assistant coaches on some other schools,
Oh.
and they're now head
Yeah.
coaches at other places. But we talk about this all the time. But there was one particular game where we played a team we were supposed to beat, and we should have beat them by like 30. And we didn't. We beat
Mhm.
them by like 10, right? But we won, but we didn't play well. So
Mhm.
we got on the bus, and we're the head coach at the time, because I was an assistant, was like, guys, get your phones out, call your parents. We're going back to the school. We're going to practice. Like, we didn't play well.
Mhm.
We won, but this is not good enough. This is not what it's, we're not playing well. So we're going to go back and we're going to practice. And the
Yeah.
guys, now we look back and we laugh about it, but they joked about how they really thought when they called their parents and told them we're going to practice, their parents were going to be like, no, you're not practicing. You're coming home. You play the game. And they were all shocked that their parents were like, well, you need to practice because y'all should have won by 30 and you didn't. Like, but they joke about
Yeah,
how
yeah.
now as coaches, if they tried to do that, how the parents would show up at the gym and would be calling the principal and calling the administration like, hey, this ain't good. No, you're not doing that to my kid. But there was a
Mhm.
difference because the parents held their kids to a different standard. Like,
Mm.
it's not good enough just to show up and play. We want you to play at your best. And when you
Right.
don't, we're not blaming other people for it. We know what you're capable of, and we're going to hold you to that standard. And I think there are times when we don't hold our own kids to a standard because we want to shield them and protect them. And we got in the real world, you can't shield and protect them. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no. It's I don't know if if it's because the world has become quite a bit unstable at the
hmm
moment that parents are a bit more sheltering of their kids, which I understand, and I think
hmm
that it leads to young adults also being a lot more trepidatious about what they do, um and I get that, but then at the same time I think taking that leap and doing just making the first step like you were talking about before is so crucial because if you don't, then you're not actually moving anywhere.
right.
Um, and going kind of branching off of those points that you were saying just now, like it's almost easy to give tips about development and
hmm
growth and kind of generalize in a way which a lot of us we do it naturally
hmm
because we kind of speak about the experiences that we've had or the experiences that we've had with other people or that we've observed from other people and use it as a blanket statement for tips about what you should and shouldn't do,
hmm
but then sometimes it's not always a one size fits all. So, throughout your years, have you ever worked with young adults who are from marginalized or underrepresented backgrounds? How do you approach mindset and development and goals for those people who might not be facing the same situations that others may?
Oh, absolutely. I I love that question because it's really important that. But yes, I have worked with people who are from, you know, people from marginalized backgrounds. Not only here as a life coach and what I'm doing now, but just throughout my career, I've worked at some
Mhm.
schools where we were dealing with some kids who were coming from some of the worst neighborhoods and from some of the worst situations. And
Yeah.
what I've found, and you said something that's really important, and I think it's amazing, and I wish more people would understand that it's not always a
Mhm.
one size fits all.
Yeah.
So, even now as a life coach, working with young adults from marginalized backgrounds, I think it's important that you have a mindset in coaching that you're culturally aware of who you're working with. It's not
Mhm.
always just let's just work harder, right? Uh, you have to understand that there are some barriers that exist in this world, and we have to find ways to help them to overcome those barriers. And we
Mhm.
empower them, and we teach them strategies to take that first step, like we talked about. And then once we
Yeah.
take that first step, if we're not always successful in that first step, what are we going to do then? What's the next step? How do we get past that? I think it's important also, and it's unfortunate that we're seeing a lot of this, especially here in the United States, where we're seeing a lot of there's an attempt to deny or kind of cover up the idea that representation is not important,
Oh, yeah.
and it very much is. Representation matters. It helps to validate your people's lived experiences and showing them that you can have a better, stronger future. The idea that having uh, equity and diversity is somehow a bad thing is ridiculous. Uh,
Yeah.
we we founded this country on the idea of pulling yourself up from the bootstraps, and you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying, and the streets are paved with opportunities, and all you have to do is work hard, and this, that, and the third. And in reality, there is some truth to working hard and the value of working hard. But what we leave out is there are some marginalized communities that have to work 10 times harder
Oh,
just to get the bare
absolutely.
minimum.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we are not always willing to confront that idea. And we don't always want to admit that that exists. And we're not always willing to create systems to help those kind of overcome those barriers. So
Mhm.
yes, I think it's very important to work with people from marginalized backgrounds and finding ways to, number one, be culturally aware, be responsible in how we work with them, build a mindset with them that kind of instill some confidence, acknowledges where they're coming from, and then help them see where they can go. And again, the old history teacher in me, I do throw a little history in there because, my, the history in this country. One of the things that I love about history, that one reason I became a history teacher, is the story of my people and the resiliency that we showed all the way starting from the time, our ancestors were brought here as slaves
Yeah.
to the emancipation, Jim Crow era, civil rights era to today. And,
Mhm.
all the things that our people have endured to become, to have people like a Malcolm X, to have a President Obama to achieve the highest office, considering, where our people started. So whether
Yeah.
wherever you stand politically, just that accomplishment in itself is worth noting. And it's
Yeah.
sad that we have people that would want to marginalize that, but it's just the reality of the world we live in, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think representation is so crucial when we talk about development and we talk
Hmm.
about mindset, we talk about growth, because it feels like, well, every time you see motivational videos or something and you're only seeing one kind of person doing a motivational video, it feels unattainable
Right.
for somebody who is underrepresented, whether it's a black kid or any other
Hmm.
kid of color, or anybody who may not be in the middle or upper class
Hmm.
and doesn't have the resources that these other people are having, who are talking about, all you have to do is work hard and you'll get XYZ. it can feel like an unattainable thing. And then when you don't see yourself represented and when you don't feel like it's possible, you don't even try,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
the danger of it. So I
Hmm.
absolutely agree with you when you talk about why it's so important to have representation, why it's so important to recognize how incredible it is to have leaders like you just mentioned and
Hmm.
so many others all across the globe to just represent what can actually happen for anybody,
Hmm.
regardless of your situation, regardless of your background, regardless of what you look like or anything.
Right.
It's yeah, it's very important to have. So I'm really happy that you actually acknowledge that and include that within your life coaching as well.
Hmm.
If you had to kind of give an example of a situation maybe where somebody who would have come to you and they feel like a bit stuck or paralyzed, or they just feel like
Hmm.
dejected about life and there's nothing that they don't feel like they can actually attain anything, how would you have helped somebody get out of that mindset?
Wow, that that's a good question. So as we talked about, one size doesn't fit all. So the first thing we would have to talk about is how we got to that point. How do we get
Yeah.
to the point where you feel like you can't accomplish anything because you did accomplish something because you found yourself here trying to
Mm,
take the next step in life? I
right.
think one of the things people need to understand is that it takes a really strong person to ask for help, to recognize
Yeah.
when you need help and ask for help. And that in itself is an accomplishment. I think too many times, and this is something that, I recently did, well, now it's been a few months now. We did a live event where we discussed, mental health for, men of color. And one of the things
Mm-hmm.
we talked about was the misconception, or this unfortunate way our community kind of marginalizes men of color's mental health, and how we've been taught to kind of internalize our feelings and not express when we need help, and those type of things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I kind of talked about that I feel is important, and I think it kind of ties in what we're talking about here, is that we have to redefine the idea of what it means to be a man, and just
Yeah.
in general, you're not weak because you ask for help. You're
Right.
not weak because you're struggling and you recognize that struggle. It's just the opposite. It takes strength to recognize when you need help. It takes strength to take the step to get that help, whether that be a mental health or, a career change, whatever the case may be. I think there is strength in that in itself. And that in itself is an accomplishment. So
Mm-hmm.
anyone who would come to me and say, "Hey, I don't think I can accomplish anything," the fact that you're here is an accomplishment. You've recognized there's a problem, you've identified a problem, and you've already started the first step to creating a plan to fix that problem. So,
Mm-hmm.
mission accomplished. Good job. You've already started. So now we're just going to sit down. We're going to discuss what our next step is. You've already taken the first
Yeah.
step. Let's plan step two.
I love that mindset actually. It's really, really reassuring as well because you come in that I'm trying to think of like putting myself in that mindset of that person.
Mhm.
I come to you completely dejected and feeling like I
Right.
haven't accomplished anything. And you immediately flip that to making me feel like I actually have accomplished something that
Mhm.
I completely overlook. And it makes me
Right.
think like, okay, what else could I be doing? I was worried about taking the first step, but I've actually already stepped
Mhm.
further than I
Exactly.
realized. So
Yes.
yeah, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful way of framing that.
Mhm.
And I feel like you've given us so much value in this conversation. I'm so happy that we got to have you on. Before we wrap up, if you wanted to kind of speak to the listeners, and it might be somebody who is a young adult who's feeling lost and feeling stuck in
Mhm.
their lives and feeling like they don't know what the hell is going on, and they
Right.
wanted to come on and listen and find some solace in this, what would be the final words that you give to that person or anyone else that is listening?
Well, kind of stick with what we've been talking about, kind of people, young adults, people entering that adulthood. We really talked about, especially those kind of entering their 20s and this kind of unreal expectations.
Yeah.
So I would say to those young people, as you enter adulthood, understand that your 20s or wherever you are in life, it's not always about having all the answers,
Hmm.
especially in your 20s. It's about building the skills to find them. Every day
Yeah.
is about being a little bit better.
Yeah.
Life's going to throw you a curveball here and there, but you have to stay curious. You have to be open to learning. You have to be willing to take the next step. And if you can do that, that's going to prepare you to be ready for whatever's going to come your way next. As a former educator, I can't help but to kind of share the fact that you got to keep learning, not just from
Mhm.
books, but from people, from experiences, and from mistakes. Don't be afraid of mistakes, embrace mistakes. Mistakes are just experience, basically. Let's stop calling them mistakes altogether. Let's just call it experience. I didn't make a
I love
mistake.
that.
I had an experience, and that's what it is. Learn from that experience and keep moving forward. I think the biggest thing you can learn in life is if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. So even
Wow.
if that first step is not always the right step, at least you're
Yeah.
moving forward. Because
Yeah.
if you're standing still, you're not going anywhere. So let's just take that first step and see what happens.
Wow, that's amazing. I hope everyone internalized that and took a piece away that they can, you know, reflect in their own lives because you've really, really given us so much value to work with. So thank you so, so much, Coach Ed, for coming on. It's been such a pleasure. I feel like I'm going to be one to listen back to this episode when I'm feeling like totally overwhelmed with my life and just kind of take it step by step with your guidance. So I'm really, really happy that we got to give that to people. And if people wanted to find more about you or your business, where can they find you? Tell us about that.
So you can go online. You can go to my website, which is coachedbradley.com. You can also find me on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. And they're all Coach Ed Bradley.
Awesome, super easy. I'll also link the website as well in the show notes so that people can find you quite easily as well. You've got no excuse to go check him out and check out his work because I guarantee you it's going to value your life because it's already done so in this episode today. Yeah, and with that, I think that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so, so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining. If you want more of the Notes and Quotes podcast, you can catch us also on socials. We're also on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. Video is exclusively on YouTube, so that's where you'd be watching both myself and Coach Ed talking to each other. If you're not, then you would be on any of the other podcast platforms that you can listen on. And yeah, I'll see you again soon. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for listening.